Well, welcome to Voices Women. I'm Chris Danis, your host, and I'm also the founder of Women of Wisdom Foundation. We are putting on our 29th annual Women of Wisdom Conference, March 11th through the 14th. It's in Seattle, Washington, but is virtual this year, of course, like everything else is. And so everybody, all women around the world can join us. And we're very excited to bring this to more women, people who've never been able to come to Seattle, can't afford to come stay in a hotel and do our conference. So now you can. So I encourage you to go look at the schedule at womanofwisdom.org. So today I'm interviewing one of our presenters, Janice Eng. Janice has been leading nonviolent communication workshops based on the work of Marshall Rosenberg, doing that in public workshops, private consultations, and in the Washington State prisons through the Freedom Project for 20 years. She's been a founding member of the two local organizations based on nonviolent communication, Northwest Compassionate Communication and the Freedom Project. And all those organizations are committed to racial equity work and social justice. She has been facilitating restorative circles through a Center for Restorative Solutions since 2018. And Janice has been a holistic healing practitioner for more than 20 years. She's been giving a workshop Sunday morning, March 14th. It's on racial equity and meaningful relationships. It's actually called Heart-Centered Activism, the Power of Women to Create Racial Equity. So welcome, Janice. So glad to have you on the show and at the conference. And you're not new to Women of Wisdom. You've been a presenter before.
I'm so excited. Actually, for many years, I've been teaching in the prisons on the third weekend of the month. So I had to miss a few years, but if people haven't been to the conference, it's an amazing conference. And so many amazing women and it's so fun and I learn so much and you get to meet so many wonderful people. So I couldn't believe how nurtured I get when I go. So I'm so glad to be part of this year. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah. So how did you get interested in the Marshall Rosenberg's work? I mean, that's really been the center of the work that you do, the nonviolent communication.
Yeah. Actually, I have been shy most of my life, like so shy that I would never say anything in meetings or even in relationship. And I just happened to see a poster one time that said one increased intimacy and how own your voice or something like that. And I said, I need to go to this. And it was such a powerful workshop for me that I knew I had to keep seeking it. Mm-hmm. And out of it, then I went into the prison one time with Marshall and a group of us, and the inmates inside said, you can't just give us a lecture. We need to practice this. And so we started a team to go into the prison. And one time I went into the Oregon State Penitentiary, and we call a movement the 10 minutes between an hour when the people can go outside. And there was one movement where people were going to lunch. And I don't know if it was just the unit or whatever it was, but in that moment, I just saw a sea of Black and brown faces. And something it was just inherently wrong. And that's when our group started looking at mass incarceration and the impact of that. So.
But I want to take that further to how, bringing this to Women of Wisdom is looking at what's getting back to, because you're using nonviolent communication, but also for racial equity. And you kind of have brought those two pieces together and you're doing this workshop. And the sense of what do you think women's role in this era of working on racial equity is? What can we do as individual women? I mean, I think that, we're powerful women, and I think we're all curious, what can I do to change things, and what can we do?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think women really understand how interconnected we are. Mm-hmm. And when you think about how this country was founded and the laws that we have, actually women didn't even get to vote until 100 years ago. I mean, we've been considered property. So women stepping into our power, owning our voices. Because when I said meaningful relationship, is like, how authentic can we be? Can we really speak from our heart? Can we say when we're mad? Can we listen to each other when somebody's saying something that's triggering?
Mhm.
So how, can we step into our full power, and can we step into more positions of power? So how can we actually be present to one another, and because the more we hold back, I'm working through this myself. It's a journey, and that I know that when I am hiding behind my like, if I don't want to share what's really going on for me, I pay for it. Not only do I pay for it, but you pay for it, because it increases the separation.
Right. And that ties into racial equity because then again, it's not looking at people as individuals. It's, we classify people and we have this filter in our eyes of who we see. And then we change how we respond to them for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Even
So,
though we don't want to, there is that, we
yeah.
have those filters
Well,
and then we respond differently to people.
yeah, yeah. Well, I would say we all hold that as a value, but what does it really mean?
Hmm.
Because we're so, even if people of color are raised to center white people's voices. I mean, my mom used to say to me every day to school, when I went to school, remember, whatever you do today, that's what they're going to think all Chinese do.
Yeah.
And
And so that's the culture. That's what you were brought up with.
yes,
You have that mindset. That's your filter.
yeah. And so that, but you don't know that your voice is being centered,
Hmm.
and it's automatic, and that like, so who is actually holding the power in the room? Who is getting talked over? And do we even see it?
Hmm.
And so it's really opening eyes to that. Whose voices are we centering? Who gets to be mad? Who,
Yeah. Yeah.
so because sometimes, if people of color are angry, it's like, oh, you're quite uppity, or those so,
So I'm curious because I was, a personal story of here your mother told you, it's kind of like, be careful what you do because that's saying all Chinese are like that. And how did that make you feel like that you had to be this perfect person so that Chinese were accepted? Um, what kind of impact did that have on you as a child?
uh well, I think that was part of my shyness,
Mm.
because if I wasn't perfect, I'm not going to say anything. So and um and it's not just that, it's who's represented even in our history books, or because it, what we're learning, since the George Floyd, since Black Lives Matter, it's just that we have had um two Americas, and that there, and I grew up in the same, and I grew up not knowing history of Asian American people. Um, I can even remember in grade school, my geography book had 2 pages on China, and it was this orange book, and it said, the people in China eat rats and rice. That was, I was like, and everybody looked at me and they said, "Is that true?" And I, it was in a school book.
Mhm.
And I'm running home to ask my parents, and they're like, "No, no," that, people would tease me with that. And but
Mhm.
who wrote that school book?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and there's such a need to rewrite history, from all eyes and all participants, because yeah, as we've been hearing so much during this Black Lives Matter, the Black people that built this country. And we just had the inauguration today and listening to Joe Biden. And we need the leaders. We need the leaders to speak out, and he did. But it takes more than that. We also, as individuals, have to speak out. And what is our role? And it's helpful to have a leader we know we've gone through the last 4 years, but to have a leader that is speaking truth and is speaking for justice and wants to lead this with his soul. That's what he said.
Mhm.
And we need that. And we also have to find that inside ourselves.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
what is our role to do, and what little bit. I mean, I think sometimes it can be feels so overwhelming of what can I possibly do to bring about
Well,
racial.
and it's not to do alone.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And to find, you found yours in Freedom Project, and going, what one thing appeals to you, because we can't do it all, and
Mhm.
find one thing that you can feel even if it's just giving money to organization that does great work,
Yes.
is one thing. And to research it and read, lots of books out there. There's been so much material in the last 9 months. Can't even remember how long it feels. And we've got COVID, and then we have the Black Lives Matter and all that. So yeah, and we can't let it go. We can't let it go to the side. And that's why we at Women of Wisdom are bringing, having this workshop, and also having you lead a panel. We have a wonderful group of women. I think there's 7 of you, of women from different backgrounds, different races,
Yeah. I'm
even,
very
and
excited.
including a Caucasian, and she works in racial equity and is also Jewish. But just to have all voices, and
Yes. Well,
that,
and there's quite a bit of anti-Semitism right now as well. So
yes, yes,
yeah.
yeah, and we have Native American and Latino and African American and Native. Let's see, what else do we have? I can't remember now. Anyway, but many, and to hear their voices, to hear their stories. I mean, they'll be sharing their stories. They'll be talking about what does racial equity look like for them. How can we be allies?
Right.
And so that's going to be going on in the panel. And I'd love for you to share it, now on this, like how maybe a tool, something that you're probably going to do in your workshop that would help us decenter our white cultural, our white privilege ways of being. What's a tool that you could give people now?
Well, I would say maybe the groups that you're in, um, notice how much the people of color are speaking, and to center their voices more. And
Center, not censor, but center.
center.
No, I just want to be clear. Sometimes it's hard to hear, like you
Okay.
say, center. We're going to, yeah, center everyone's
Because
voices.
they're the ones that need to be heard.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I've even found that in our circles of Women of Wisdom, we used to have pretty big circles of planning committee, or our council members. There would be quiet ones. And if you stopped and asked them what they were thinking, what they wanted to contribute, because there is the quiet voice, and they don't always speak up because the loud voice is heard. And they come up with juicy stuff. You need that pause, you need that place for a quiet person to have the opportunity to speak up and ask them, be curious. And it enlarges the conversation. It brings more to the table. And it's actually, what I've seen is just results and decisions and ideas come for just become so much more than
Yeah.
the original idea, the topic of what you think, okay, this is the direction we're going. And you stop and allow these quiet voices to come in. And the same thing with people of color. What you're saying is to allow their voices to come in, to be heard, and create the
Yes.
safe space for that to happen.
Yes. Um, and not only centering and supporting, but actually also, if you notice something, to also speak up,
Mm-hmm.
or and or at least signal to the person, like say, hey, I saw that. If there's what we call a microaggression, if somebody says something like, oh, that like one that's often said to me, it doesn't matter if uh, like I'd be with a German friend that has a heavy accent. They always ask me where I'm from. and instead of leaving it to the person of color to always be speaking up, to
Mm-hmm.
speak up sometimes, or if you see somebody talking over somebody, it's like, say, hey, can we hear the rest of what this person has to say, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, just yeah, open up the conversation to say, well, let's hear from other people. Because
Mhm.
I mean, there always are in a group, people who are quiet and people who are very talkative, and then people get resentful of someone monopolizing. And it's just, hey, stop the conversation, say, well, what do other people here think about this? That helps. That's one tour. One
Yes,
tool.
I mean, in some groups that I'm in, we actually have the people of color speak first.
Oh,
But
well,
we're in an intimate group that have been together for a while, but actually to make sure that the voices are centered.
mm-hmm. Well, another thing is about building trust, and that's what we were talking about, to have deep and meaningful relationships with Black, Indigenous, people of color. How do we build that trust?
Yes.
Because, I mean, we know, I don't know, I guess maybe some of my experiences, there's kind of a lack of trust and a lack of willing to be open and share with us. So
Mhm.
how do we build that trust? I mean,
Yes.
you gave us one example of just, letting them talk first, but um, it's also, I think, how do we listen to them, and how do we
Yeah. First of all, just even believing the experience,
mm,
because a lot of times they go, oh, that's not what I meant, or oh, this, and what you want to hear is the impact.
mhm,
Of if something has happened that has impact for someone, even if that wasn't the intention,
right,
is to just be open to hear about the impact before speaking. And
and
um,
allowing the space for them to share the impact, because a lot of times, even for me, we'll clam up and be quiet, and we won't share how that impacted us or what we're feeling out of
mhm,
fear of not being heard or not being accepted, and for whatever reason.
yeah,
And so it happens to a lot of people, but particularly for people of color.
yeah, and especially if they're a minority in the room,
Right,
then
right.
it's harder to
Yeah.
speak up.
Yeah. And
And
I think we're wanting that place where people will speak up, because we're wanting to learn. The only way we learn is when we make mistakes. But if we don't understand the impact, even though our intentions are good, but the intentions isn't what it's about now.
yeah.
And I've been hearing
And
this a lot
I
too,
would
the
say that
past several years, it's
I
impact.
would say when somebody apologizes, that builds more trust than anything else.
Mm,
I even in workshops, and I know when I co-present with my uh, with white presenters, and they say, "Oh, I see that," and they apologize. It builds trust within the whole group.
right. And to own it, I think, I think in the past of seeing a reaction, they're
Mhm.
not sharing how that impacted them, but you can sense a reaction.
Right.
And to be curious and say, oh, wait, did what I say make you, what are your feelings about what I said? Because I sense something,
Yeah.
but we're afraid to kind of speak
I
up and
saw
share
you.
that.
I saw you flinch, or can you tell me what's going on with you?
Yeah, it's hard to. I mean, we're
Yeah.
kind of embarrassed to, and or afraid to,
Uh-huh.
um,
But that's it.
and they may not share it with us. That's their option. They may not
Yeah.
share their
Yeah.
feelings, but
Or maybe later they'll share,
yeah,
or yeah, or just be open. And I think that's why white caucus groups are really important, as well as people, Black, Indigenous, people of color caucus groups, because you can have a place to share about it and not expect the other person to have you feel better, or to learn, or and so that it's safe places to explore and do healing work.
yeah. So if you sense a reaction, well, sometimes it doesn't feel like a safe place to bring it up, but if you then talk about it with other people of your race, like Caucasian people or whatever, um, and then the other people could give their feedback of, oh yeah, I had that experience before too, and or here's another way you could have said that, and that we can learn from our experiences so we
Mhm.
can grow. And if we keep it inside ourselves, we're just going to hide in shame and guilt, and not figure out, well,
And we
how can I
are,
get better?
as human beings, we're going to say something. We're going to do something that is going to impact another person negatively. That's just
Mhm.
human social behavior.
Yeah.
And if we can own up to it, that's how we build trust.
Yes.
And because we care about the other person. And if
Yeah.
we can express that care, then that's going to build trust.
Well, I think one of the issues too is like, depending on where you live in a city, I live in the North End, it's predominantly white. How many circles of people have that are I'm around that are people of color? And so how do I extend myself out there to be with people of color and to learn about their life and their experiences and hear from them? So what do you suggest about that?
Well, first of all, there's a reason that that's happened
Well,
because
yeah, we know that.
redlining and things like that.
Yeah.
But uh, I would say participate more in communities of color, in going to Black churches, going to Black Lives Matter marches. Um, there's so many organizations that and even with Freedom Project, we have classes, we have groups. Um, I mean, the Center for Restorative Solutions, we have our groups as well. So the racial healing circles. Uh, I mean, if you just go farther south, in
Mhm.
Seattle, with volunteer in the schools, or or even areas in the north. So there's plenty of opportunities.
Yeah, and things are changing. I grew up in the North End in an area that was, in the 50s, all white.
Hmm.
My niece lives there now, and I think her, I don't know, he's 7-year-old, starting school. It's in my grade school, and it is 75% people of color now.
Oh,
So, things do change. they,
uh-huh.
they do change.
Yeah.
Um, but and there's a sense of sometimes I think in my own fear of, well, will I be welcome there going down south, going down to areas where people of color, or going to groups that are people of color, of getting over my fears of being accepted, of being my shyness, my, if I might feel uncomfortable being there because I feel like, oh, I shouldn't be here, I don't belong. Will they want me to be here? All those questions come up, you know,
Yeah.
would they even want me there? I mean, I think these are things we think about, and that kind of
Uh-huh.
holds us
Yeah.
back, and that's where courage comes in, that we
Yeah.
have to.
Courage. And I would also say that where your voice is really important is with other white people. I think it's very important to get to know people of other cultures. And it's also very important to, because your voice really matters with other white people.
Speak about this, to talk about these
Yes.
issues,
Uh-huh.
racial equity and all that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And there has been a lot. I've been in a couple of classes with the church I go to. We've been studying some books and not just studying. We've been having a lot of discussions, some Zoom meetings that we break up into little groups and we talk about our experiences or things that we read in the book, and processing a lot. And I think that's important too. I know some people are saying, well, you're just reading a book. What do what change is really going to happen? But it's the internal work, it's doing our internal work and really facing our biases inside ourselves. And so that's one of the reasons to bring this to Women of Wisdom, is for people to have an opportunity to look at all the different issues here and to look at our own biases and to
Mhm.
hear the powerful stories from the women of color. I've already interviewed many of them, and it just brings you to tears to think about what they have gone through. And you shared yours as a child, the expectation to represent the Chinese people. And you were probably in a minority there, I'm sure,
Well,
because you
yes, we
grew up.
were the only Chinese family in my hometown.
Yeah, and it kind of also was a Hispanic area too, probably because you had the farm workers.
Yes, quite a few.
Yeah. So yeah, I know you were the only family there. So yeah, that's, it's hard to even understand that. I think we need to put ourselves in other people's shoes and look at, okay. In fact, I visited I was in the Bahamas and I visited friends of friends and I stayed with the, you know, people of color family and went to church with them. And I was the only white person in the church. And it was, you know, very, you know, you got to look at like, oh, you know, wow, I'm the only one here. I'm, you know, and not that, yeah, they made me, were welcoming me and all that, but it's an interesting experience. And that's what a lot of people of color go through too,
Yes, and I would say probably,
all the
most
time.
people of color, they come from collective cultures where it's more a we culture, whereas white culture is more individualistic culture.
Mhm.
And so it was probably very, like, oh, come in, welcome, eat.
Mhm.
So it's more other oriented and more uh, collective, I guess. And I was just saying the difference sometimes with one of my friends' church and some of the communities of color churches. It's like, no, they serve you. They want to stay, coffee. Let's talk. Let's have build community, that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
whereas the church that I went to with my friend, it was as soon as it's over, let's go to our car and go. But the community is the main part in most churches of color.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think there's even a jealousy of that.
Jealousy.
Yeah, that we wish, you know, because that's kind of missing in our culture a little bit, you know, that sense of community, and that we could look like, wow, look at them, they really have a community, they really enjoy being with each other, they're really active, lively, you know, and my family, my groups aren't like that, or whatever. I don't know, I was just feeling like that could make someone feel jealous of and envious, not jealous, but envious.
I mean, and that's why I love Women of Wisdom. I was shocked, it was like, oh, this is such a nurturing community. And I think that what you've done over the years, that's why I've loved the conference.
Mm.
You've really worked on building community. You can feel the community, and the people feel very welcome. And the I, um, that I think the interdependence, how interconnected we all are, you just really feel it. Like
Mhm.
there's an automatic sense of belonging. So
Yeah, and we've been around so many years, but that's from day one of creating a safe place, for a safe container for women to be together and share their stories and feel heard. And so it's, you know,
groups of healers, groups of
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
storytellers, and
yeah.
dancers, and as well. Yeah, I mean it's been a very loving, nurturing community, as well as really supporting the voice of women.
So I've been asking all our presenters what your thoughts are, like your workshop and your work fitting in our theme. This year is celebrating spirit of woman, united we are one. And I don't want, sometimes I look at that now and I go, oh, that's so not united we are one. I mean, you know, so when they're talking about, you know, we got to unify the country, but it's based on inclusivity and knowing that, you know, it can be kind of a rote phrase of, oh, we're all one, can almost feel like a spiritual bypass, they say. And yet what we're talking about is something much more deeper, of recognizing all our differences,
Mm-hmm.
embracing our differences and being together.
Mm-hmm.
You
Okay.
know, what's our commonality? What, you know, our, our
Okay.
commonality, woman of wisdom, is we're all women and we all have a spirit, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
um,
I would say probably that we are all one. So that means that you matter,
mm,
and that your voice matters. And not only that you matter, but I matter. And any place that we think we don't matter, or I'm not enough in some way, that's the voice of oppression. And don't give in to that voice. Like, who's the one that's saying that? And so it's to maybe honor our mattering and stepping up and owning it. And yeah, I guess.
Oh, that's great. I love that. That's a wonderful way to say that. This definitely is the energy behind that phrase for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a daily practice, because how many things do we have coming our way all the time that is trying to tell us that we don't matter?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and whether it's race or gender, sexual orientation, whatever, you know, that uh, so and that's probably the crux of nonviolent communication, is really getting back to who we are, and getting away from the conditioning. It's not what making a distinction of what is habitual and what is normal, you know, what is my voice, what is my need, rather than being told what we're supposed to want or need.
Yeah, just trying to fit in
Yeah.
and do what's expected of you in our society and our culture.
Hmm.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show today, Janice.
Thank you. It was fun.
Offering your
I look
wisdom.
forward
And
to being at the conference.
yes, well, please give your website so people can find out more about you.
Okay, it's janiceng.com, JANICEENG.com.
JaniceEng.com. And everybody can go to womanofwisdom.org and see everything that's being offered. The racial equity panels on Saturday, and Janice's workshop is, what day are you?
On Sunday.
Sunday. That's right, Sunday. It's hard to keep track of the schedule. Okay. So this is Christanis and Voices of Women, and I'll be back with more interviews with our Women Wisdom presenters.